Every year, NBA fans gather to bicker and provoke about our favorite thought exercise. Who is the NBA's best player? A generally subjective question with an answer often heavily reliant on contextual and oftentimes downright lucky factors has turned into a fiery debate with no real winning or losing. I know, sounds like fun.
Great, because I also think it sounds like fun.
Everybody has their own criteria, biases, and explanations, and I think it's important to acknowledge that stylistic preference can play an influential role in anyone's selection of their top player. Hell, even here it was difficult for me not to blindly throw Stephen Curry at the number one spot because of my affinity for the manner in which he plays. That being said, I tried to eliminate bias and measure the following players through concrete and consistent evidence that I hope you can find compelling. So, without further ado, let's do it. Here's my best attempt at not getting yelled at in the comments as much as possible. Here are my top 7 players heading into the 2021-2022 NBA season. First, I think it's important to mention the first few cuts from this list and give some explanation. There were 4 names that were genuinely debated for the 7th and final spot. Those 4 included Joel Embiid, Anthony Davis, James Harden, and Kawhi Leonard. I used 5 general categories to evaluate and eventually rank the players. First was individual impact. Whether it's counting stats, advanced stats, efficiency, the best player in the league will always show up on the stat sheet. Second was availability. None of these categories mean anything if you can't be on the court. The NBA is too talented to take years off and keep the crown of best player on your head. Third, we have team impact. How does each player impact the success or failure of his team? Is his team consistently better with him on the court, and how much better? Has he proved to be a winner in the past? Does he do the little things? Fourth, we have stylistic diversity. Can the player fit into a multitude of systems and play with a variety of personnel? How context dependent is the player's success? Finally, we have intangibles. This was more of a gut reaction and is hard to back up using video. This category is about leadership and mentality. Who has proven it before? Who do we trust to show up for their team on a night-to-night basis? After evaluating the criteria, Kawhi was the first to go because of availability, after suffering an obviously unfortunate ACL injury that prevents him from seriously impacting his team's success until late in the season at best. Between the remaining 3, I settled on Embiid. In a vacuum, I'm not committing to him being a more impactful or even better player than either Davis or Harden this season. What I am saying is he has a higher chance to end up proving himself as the best player in the league. That's because barring injury, Davis and Harden aren't the best players on their respective teams. I think it goes without saying that the best player in the league must be the best player on their own team, and that's why Embiid gets the nod here. So let's dive deeper into Joel Embiid, and particularly why I couldn't put him above the man at number 6. For Joel, the counting stats are there. This is a dude that just averaged 28.5 points, 10.6 rebounds, and 1.8 assists on 63.6% true shooting, all while being a Defensive Player of the Year candidate while he was healthy. The list of bigs to score over 25 points per game on over 60% true shooting is as follows: Joel Embiid, Shaquille O'Neal, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, David Robinson, Yao Ming, Nikola Jokic, and Karl Anthony Towns. Pretty good company. And that list gets shorter when you factor in making an all-defensive team in that same season. So yeah, Embiid had a decent season. His effect on team success is perhaps even greater, as the 76ers were 12.3 points better when Embiid was on the court per cleaning the glass. That number jumps to almost 20 in the playoffs, as Embiid elevated the Sixers to a top 12th percentile offense and defense while he was on the court. He nearly single-handedly carries their half-court offense. Last season, Embiid led the league in post-ups and was not far behind in total front-court touches. Embiid justifies this with a very respectable 0.4 points per touch, which ranked second among qualified centers. On defense, Embiid was everywhere, and opponents shot worse from every corner of the court when Embiid played. Even when Embiid is playing without one of Tobias Harris or Ben Simmons, the Sixers are still a net positive team, in a pretty large sample size. Because of all this, it is clear to see that Joel Embiid's play positively affects his team and leads to winning, which is really all that matters. But when you're splitting hairs between top players, we just have to dive into more criteria. So where does he fall short? And why can't he be higher on this list? 2 reasons: stylistic stubbornness and availability. Stylistic stubbornness is a characteristic that almost inherently encapsulates Embiid because of his monstrous size. Due to his size, Embiid struggles to speedily get up and down the court. In fact, Embiid struggles to get from the block to the wing. Because of this, Embiid's pick and roll frequency sat at 12.5% last season. Here's a list of some players that scored more points off the pick and roll than Joel Embiid last year: Chris Boucher, Kem Birch, and Wendell Carter Jr. In a vacuum, that's not a huge issue. Nikola Jokic and Karl Anthony Towns post very similar pick and roll percentages. The issue is that those two guys spend time on the perimeter as dribble handoff initiators, spot-up men, and even primary ball handlers. Embiid does none of this outside of a couple trailing 3 balls per game. That makes for a pretty inflexible player that needs a specific tempo and a specific game plan to maximize his individual production. His post-game, while brilliant in aspects, is also limited in playmaking and encouraging off-ball movement. He posted a pretty ghastly .91 assist-to-turnover ratio last year, and struggles to take advantage of the great cutters that surround him, such as Ben Simmons and Danny Green. Because of all this, Embiid requires a particular supporting cast full of cutters, perimeter initiators, and smart playmakers. Outside of that, availability is the biggest issue. It's well known that Embiid has yet to play more than 64 games in a regular season. This is an issue that often persists into the playoffs with nagging injuries. If Embiid can prove to play a more flexible, fluid brand of basketball and stay healthy all year, he could legitimately be the best player in the world. But compared to the names higher on this list, it's a long shot. Which brings us to number 6 on this list. Boy wonder, Luka Doncic. To even be in the best player in the world conversation at 22 years old is astounding and close to unprecedented.
What the fuck did you just say, Sal?
I said close, LeBron. Chill out. The raw stats jump off the page first. Luka's an ultra-efficient, ultra-aesthetically pleasing, ultra-complaining primary initiator. I'm not even sure the term primary initiator does him justice. He's just the initiator. He's a supersized maestro of a point guard, and watching some of the reads he makes from a bird's eye view is staggering. The list of guys to even average over 27 points per game and over 8 assists per game on above average league efficiency is as follows. That makes him a really good player. But what separates him as one of the best is what he's done in the playoffs. The list of players to score 35 points a game on above average efficiency and dish out 10 assists per game in the playoffs is one man and one man only.
Luka Doncic!
His statistical resume is indubitably amongst the best in the league. But how do the monstrous numbers affect winning? This is where Doncic compares to the rest of the names on this list in terms of on-off plus minus. Yes, context matters here, but we're comparing players on teams that generally maintain mild success when they leave the court. It's reasonable to expect a little more out of Luka here, especially when comparing him to the league's best. He carries them to a scorching hot offense, but a pretty underwhelming defense that is much better with him off the floor. Dallas is still a plus team with him off the court, and Jalen Brunson runs a pretty tight ship off the bench. To me, a clear reason for the disappointing plus-minus numbers is Luka's stylistic stubbornness. Much like Embiid, Luka's team plays at Luka's tempo. The prodigy of heliocentric basketball isn't necessarily easy to play with. When you're on the court with Luka, it can often boil down to standing still and waiting for some sort of signal from Luka to cut, get ready for a shot, or screen. If we compare Luka's touches, average time of touch, and average dribble per touch to Steph, it looks something like this. Steph touches it less for a shorter amount of time and dribbles it far less than Luka. Keep in mind, Steph scored more points in a more efficient manner. So yeah, Luka has an intimate relationship with the basketball. His stubbornness is a problem. It's not the end of the world, particularly for a 22-year-old, but it knocks him down on this list. Outside of that, Luka grades is fairly durable, having missed at least 5 but no more than 15 games in each of his first 3 seasons. He's proven to be exceptionally clutch for a young gun in his first few years, and the Mavericks don't have to worry much about late-game offense with him on the court. So that's Luka. A statistical marvel, but fails to impress in the team impact and stylistic diversity categories when compared to the top 5 guys on this list. Which leads us to perhaps the most controversial ranking on this list. The King, LeBron James. This is so incredibly hard to do. As a Warriors fan, my mind is tortured with images of James' brilliance. I was very reluctant to even think about another player surpassing him once KD went down with his Achilles injury in 2019. And that proved to be true in 2020. James won the NBA championship and was rightfully crowned the finals MVP. But then came 2021, a season of mixed returns, ultimately culminating in a somewhat embarrassing playoff elimination to the Phoenix Suns. So what's the problem with LeBron? To put it lightly, he's getting old. To me, this is most clear in his shot selection portfolio. This is the percentage of shots that come from three for James in the last 6 seasons. As you can see, it just keeps growing. If you compare this to his three-point percentages, you just don't see the same trend. Instead, you see what he's always been, an inconsistent but capable and confident three-point shooter. Stats like this tell us that James is spending a lot less time doing what he's best at, barreling into the lane and causing havoc, usually resulting in a bucket or one of his trademark kickouts. You could argue some of this has to do with context. Obviously, the Lakers want to give Anthony Davis space down low, but I'm confident in attributing at least some of this to just aging and recognizing that LeBron's body can't stand to be a battering ram for 82 games anymore. So, yes, the numbers are still there. LeBron put up an efficient 25, 8, and 8 last season, but the way he does it has changed. And if we're talking about elite primary initiators, it's changed for the worse. LeBron's free throw rate has dropped from .43 in 2014 to .31 this past season. The best primary initiators in this game could score at will, and right now, LeBron isn't necessarily that. His scoring game has become three-point reliant with a shaky shot from deep. He doesn't get to the line as much as his body type and previous playstyle tell you he should, and he can't make free throws at above 70% when he does get there. So oops, I said it. LeBron James is no longer the best player in the NBA. But damn it, he's still a pretty good one. The Lakers were 10.6 points better when LeBron was on the floor last season. He's still an exceptional passer who sees the entire court and never fails to make the right read. He's also got a refined mid-post game and still knows how to play some bully ball. James is a fantastic off-ball defender, second to only Giannis as a free safety on the back line. LeBron is easy to play with and has proven his stylistic diversity over and over again. He's won as the lead guard, as a wing, and also as a big. He's led and won in so many different situations, and while he demands the ball, he keeps it hot, and it makes for a lot of on-court movement, which is really what an offense boils down to sometimes. Obviously, the last concern with James is durability. He hasn't played more than 67 games since 2017-18, and this shouldn't come as a surprise. A 75-plus game season for a player with his career usage would be unprecedented. The question is whether he can look like himself for 20 playoff games. The fact that we don't have a concrete answer to that question is a legitimate concern when comparing the league's best. He might not have the best odds, but LeBron James still has a puncher's chance at being the best player in the world, and counting out the king has never gone favorably. But I wouldn't count out the man at number 4 either. The Joker, Nikola Jokic. Listen, I get it. Jokic won MVP last year. He didn't even have his co-star for their playoff run, and he hasn't slowed down a small sample size this season. Jokic is an uber-efficient offensive hub for the Denver Nuggets, carrying their offense to 121.5 points per 100 possessions in last year's regular season. He does everything for this team, from leading them in scoring at 26.4 points per game, to assisting on 37.6% of their made baskets. His statistical resume is unlike anything we've ever seen from a big in the NBA, and he only gets better in the playoffs. The centers to score at least 29 points per game and record at least 4 assists per game during a playoff run of 10 or more games are as follows: Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Hakeem Olajuwon, and Nikola Jokic. He did all this shooting 8 points above league average true shooting percentage. He's single-handedly a top offense in the league. His effect on team success can't be understated as well. In the regular season, the Nuggets were understandably 6.4 points better with Jokic on the floor. He brings their offense to sky-high levels and he stays alive on defense, although they get much better when he leaves the floor. I want to address the Jokic defense thing here, as it has become trendy to say he's underrated on that side of the ball. I severely disagree. Jokic's inability to switch or pretty much play anything other than drop coverage really inhibits the aggressiveness in which the Nuggets can play D. The best example of this was when they were swept by the Suns last season, as high-usage pick-and-roll players and mid-range savants Devin Booker and Chris Paul simply took what Jokic gave them, which was a lot of room. In the regular season, and with this scorching offense, it's passable. But in a league run by dynamic perimeter initiators that love to involve slow, lumbering bigs in the pick and roll, this gets problematic, man. In the last 2 playoffs, the Nuggets have actually been a combined 5 points worse when Jokic is on the floor, and that's at a 29-game sample size. Here's a comparison of his playoff plus-minus numbers versus the names that have come before him over their last 2 playoff runs respectively. Again, context plays a role in everything, but that's not just a coincidence. I think it boils down to 2 things. First is the defense I already touched on. The inability to throw out different pick and roll coverages when he's on the floor can be pretty devastating. Offensively, I think there could be a lack of pace diversity as well. The Nuggets ranked 27th in pace last year, which isn't uncommon in the Jokic era. It's not that they always need to be running, it's just that it would be nice if Jokic could do that. The most he'll contribute to the fast break is his beautiful outlet passes. For those 2 reasons, and although he's an absolute magician, I don't quite think Jokic is a top 3 player in basketball. Again, this list is assuming that all 7 players have a shot at the crown and ranking them by probability of achieving this. Jokic has a real shot, but I'd like to see the Nuggets no longer need to cater to his needs as much in the playoffs, particularly on defense. Either way, the Joker is poised for a splendid season. And that just about does it for the first part of my 2-part series on the best basketball players in the world. If you enjoyed this one, please let me know, and part 2 will be out as soon as possible. I hope I made a lot of people mad today, and feel free to take my head off in the comments. But as always, thanks for stopping by. My name's Carvel Tefft, and if you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much. Be sure to check out our channel for regular video diaries and podcasts from Carson, Logan, and myself. We also recently launched our website, nerdsesh.com, where you can find all our podcast and video content as well as written material. Once again, thanks for stopping by and have a great week.